Ooh, wow. Okay, Zoom. Good morning. It's morning for me. And I pretty much have rolled out of bed and rolled into this camera. So my voice sounds like sleep and my face looks like sleep. So deal with it. I have a small list of conversations I've been wanting to have with people for years. And this story and this teaching that I'm going to offer, because that's what it is. It's been a lesson that I've been learning over the years, and it's something that I see a fast need for in the current social, especially social and then political climate. And I say it that way because in my mind, what I think I'm seeing when I look out on the world is that the way we show up politically, it starts with how we show up socially, our interactions with one another, with what we learn in our families and our interactions with the world and all of that. So this is a superpower that I learned. I don't know what I'm going to end up titling this video, but it is definitely a superpower. And I have seen it in action in a handful of people in my life. And it's something that I learned how to do after a very specific experience that I'm going to tell you about. And it's a superpower that I know more people need to learn and develop. So the superpower is not succinct. Like, I'm not going to be able to just give it out there in a succinct way, I don't think. So it is the ability to be in conversation, direct conversation with someone that we no doubt about it, no question about it, we disagree with. And here's the superpower part. We are still able to stay in conversation with that person, be curious about what they're saying, manage the emotional weather that's going on internally in response to what we think we're hearing without blowing up the conversation. When we are able to be in conflict with someone, and that's what it is. So it's two opposing ideas or two ideas that seem like they're opposing. Being able to stay in the same space physically and mentally and emotionally, like in this vehicle that we are in, all those bodies that we have. For you yoga practitioners out there and you energy workers out there, body workers, all of the bodies are able to stay present. You know, the emotional body might need to take backseat while the mental body, you know, is paying attention, and the physical body, you know, we're doing our breathing, and these are the things that I learned, and these are the things that I will share with you. Not all of it in this video, but this is the skill set that I have learned in order to be able to stay in conversation with someone that I disagree with, in order to understand that person and a broader view of the situation that we are both in, so that then I at least have more capacity to actually negotiate in this situation, speak my perspective in a clear way that can be understood and held by someone. These words might sound like lofty or impractical or soft, or, you know, you might have all kinds of words. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you stick with me in this video and you are having these responses coming up, like that's bullshit, or that's the stupidest thing whatever the defense mechanisms are that we throw at other people in conversation, whether or not we're verbalizing them externally or we're just verbalizing them internally, wherever it is that we are blocking, shutting down, disengaging, et cetera, if you catch yourself while I'm speaking, because I'm going to say some things that you're not going to agree with. That is the nature of reality. When we speak in conversation, that is a perfect moment. I was going to say the first opportunity. I don't know actually the order of how this thing works, but if you catch yourself reacting, if you feel it in your gut, if you want to reach out and strike, if your mind is just listing off all the ways in which what I'm saying is wrong, that is your opportunity to start practicing this stuff. And I'll give you a tip right now. So when we're out there in the world, or when you're watching this video and you are feeling combative, or you're feeling like you want to disappear, run away, or you're like freezing. Freezing might be a little bit more difficult to work with in the beginning, but if you practice these things, you'll get there also. So if any of these responses are coming up in you as you're watching this video and hearing the words that I'm saying, I want you to start noticing this in yourself, noticing. You don't even have to get curious. If you're ready to if you're like like an honor student, or my words escape me when I start talking. So I see pictures a lot of times, but like if you're an ambitious student, okay, then you can try taking on multiple tasks around this, learning how to stay in place when a conversation or an idea, I'm thinking, because the word ideology also comes to mind, conviction, when one of those things showing up in another person is feeling really challenging or uncomfortable, or just like you just want to wipe it off the face of the planet, it is really important that we learn how to stay in our body when we're having this experience. Because if we are constantly flying out of it or constantly wanting to strike out at someone, we will never get to the place where we can be in dialogue with that other idea, conviction, ideology, thought process in a way that can alchemize it into something that serves more people. Collaboration is, I think, another expression of this. We are not, okay, I don't know if this is true, like with a big T. I don't know if this is a big T truth. But so I'm going to say it as my little T truth, because this is my understanding so far. This is as far as I've gotten with it. We are not going to be able to collaborate on everything in the world. The other thing that hit my brain when that idea came into me just now is that not every one of us will be able to collaborate on everything that we come into contact with in the world. And there was a third thing that's like a variation of that, but what I understand so far is that there are some things in us individually that we're not meant to, I'll use the word compromise on. Like there are some beliefs, some experiences, some values. That's the word. There are some values that each of us have and hold that are true to us. And I'm going to say to us, they're true with a capital T. They're not going to be someone else's truth. with a capital T. But they're going to be the things that carry us through our lives and are the makeup of who we are as individuals. And there will be some things that are not going to be negotiable. That's the word I'm looking for. They're non-negotiable things for us individually. But the person sitting next to us is going to have a different set of life experiences that are going to have developed in them a different set of values, like core values, and they will be able to negotiate on that issue. There is something about there being a multitude of us humans, and each of us carrying a different, even if it's a slightly different part of the big human family picture and the things of governance. I'm thinking of things that humans do, although other animals have hierarchical systems too, and they have systems of society. So I'm not going to separate us out like that. But I am speaking about the human family right now and how we interact with one another, because that is one of the things that I mentioned in the last video, like vaguely mentioned in the last video, that is just like up for renewal and all the things that are happening in our social constructs right now. So one of the things that I understand and recognize so far is that because there are so many of us, there are a lot of different perspectives on how the world functions, what's really true and meaningful, and how the world should function. Just look at your neighbor, and if the two of you spent enough time together, you're going to come to something in the conversation that you do not agree on. That is the nature of human interaction. And we tend to gravitate towards the people who are like us in thinking. I know everybody knows this. What we need to learn how to do, like it's like grades in school, and when that graduation day comes, it comes because we have participated in the lessons of that year, and we have this cumulative experience of, okay, I made it through first grade tasks, and now I get to go to second grade and learn second grade tasks, and I carry my first grade tasks with me, and we just keep like moving up that hill. So we develop our values over the course of, and it seems to be a very short period of time, when we like collect and gather those first values. Our family teaches us things, and we adopt those as our things, and then we live life from that place, and we do this into our 20s. And then at some point we start having experiences where we're bumping up against other humans that didn't grow in our family, and like our values that maybe we didn't even know were our values, our values, our beliefs about things, which are not necessarily the same as values. I'm just trying to give you a variety of vocabulary to work with so that you can find your place in this, because I do believe that most people out there in the world have a place in learning to develop this particular superpower. I'm excluding, I won't get into that because there might be all kinds of questions. Okay, so just so you know what we're working with here in this conversation. I don't think I want to say follow, but I do accept the rule of exceptions. I accept ACCEPT, the rule of exceptions, EXCEPTIONS. So there's always an exception to a rule. I don't know if that's true with a capital T, but it makes sense. So I'm applying that here. Not everyone has to learn this skill. Like there are some people functioning in the world who who have different assignments in this life. Okay, but I think for the majority of us, learning how to disagree with another person while simultaneously recognizing our personal values and being willing to test our personal values. Is this really what I believe about life and my place in it, and what I want to experience in my life and my place in it? Or is this person or this interaction bringing me some new information that I need to consider and perhaps integrate, refine with, up level, evolve, etc. Okay. And when we are working on making community agreements, and this is what has inspired me to finally sit down and offer this story of my life, this part of my life that has been a huge part of the way that I move in the world. And I didn't realize that until years and years and years down the road after I started doing this. I'm going to tell you what the story is. Hang in there. It's a good story. It's a short story, but I believe we've been in a time all of my life where we need to learn how to do what I just said about our values. I understand my values. I am solid in my values. And when I meet someone who's also solid in their values and can back up what they're saying with their own set of research, personal, experiential, this has been my life and my experiences research, and whatever other research we consider for ourselves to be enough to validate what we're saying. I hope you guys are getting what I'm throwing out there right now, because I am speaking of specific things, but because algorithm doesn't like certain things, can't like say the words. And I'm not limiting it to some of these recent big things that have been happening that we have been grappling with in like a combative tug of war kind of way. I am also talking about small things in interpersonal relationships, with our friends, with our family, with our coworkers. Like this skill of learning how to stay present in a conversation when what we're hearing I'm going to say it like this, feels like an assault on our sense of integrity, on our value system, on the ways that we feel safe in the world. And the thing that I understand is that when I look out at a couple of the biggest arguments and fights that people are in right now, I am hearing people on what we would call both sides, under all of the rhetoric, expressing the same desires. And that is what I want people, more and more people, to start getting a skill for recognizing. It doesn't mean that we give up what we know to be true. It does mean that we start to understand that the person that we think we are in a fight with also believes with the same depth of conviction that what they are saying is true. And if we are going to insist that our truth be validated and recognized in the culture, we have to be willing to recognize, and I'm going to say respect, we can play with that word, the person that we feel we are in conflict with we have to respect them as a reflection of ourselves. Otherwise, if our solution is to invalidate the other person, then we're invalidating ourselves. That's just what we're doing. It's that mirroring thing. And I know I'm oversimplifying that process, but until we can learn to respect the other person who is as passionately convinced of their viewpoint, I'm not saying we have to agree with their viewpoint. What I'm saying right now is that if we are unwilling to recognize the reality of another valid human standing in front of us, defending what they believe is true and right, we are knocking ourselves out of the park as well. And there will be no conversation. There will be no collaborating as a community, which it doesn't matter what you want in terms of people living in the same space together. We live in the same space together. If you're out in the woods somewhere, you're probably not watching this video, but then you have a different community. You are in community with a different part of life. Those of us that live in cities and suburbs and populated areas, we have to collaborate. There are going to be people or groups or belief systems that take leadership control. And then there will be a point at which they're not in leadership control anymore. That is like the cycle of decline that I was talking about in the last video. That's a part of the cycle of decline. So, there will be people in power, there will be ideas in power, there will be rules in power for however long they're in power, and then they'll shift out of power. Like, I often have the image of like schools of fish, when we see those beautiful underwater images of these big schools of fish, and then all of a sudden they change directions. I don't believe it's all of a sudden. I believe there's a buildup of things that happen. But what I'm wanting you to hear in that is there are cycles of change constantly. So part of the way that I think those cycles of change happen is that people have these dialogues, but then maybe have those dialogues in groups where people are already pretty much mostly on board, and then there's just more of them, and the direction shifts. I don't know what the real answer is on that, but that's just what I can understand with my mind and my set of experiences to this point. I think we're moving into an age where if we can figure out how to do this, this is going to be a really awesome, neat magic trick, depending upon the scale of the humans involved and impacted. But learning how to actually collaborate and alchemize. And I don't know what that process is because I haven't seen it in action too often. But when I have seen a brand new thing come to life in a community, there's conflict over here and there's conflict over here, and then people work at, I'm just going to say, work at the conflict. Something new comes out of it. Like a third or fourth thing is offered because we are using our creative capacity to generate something that hasn't been in effect. So far, we've had these polar opposites, and maybe one of the opposites has been in leadership for however long, and the other opposites been like wanting that leadership, you know, and so we pull the thing over to this side. But in order for the co-labor, that collaboration to function for the larger community, something new has to be created. And in communities, in relationships, this is where I have witnessed it most often, is in one-to-one relationships. My experience with the people I've been in one-to-one relationship with, and the other rare sets of people who have done this in their one-to-one relationships or very, very small groups. And what is needed in this is two parties who are willing to do their own work. And part of that work is catching our reactivity. This is a really big conversation, actually, and I'm wanting to plant some seeds. So I'm going to go ahead and tell the story. This is the experience and the moment in time in my life that got me started down this path. So I was riding home on a school bus. I think it was high school, could have been junior high, but no, it would have been high school. I have to locate myself. I've moved a lot in my life. And I was talking with a group of, I'm going to say what I considered friends. And I don't know how the conversation got onto race, but it did. I don't know how it did. And it was a very, I'm going to say it was a very innocent. All the things that happened were very innocent. And I can say that from this perspective years and years and years later. But in the moment, when this conversation happened, for those of you in astrology, like into astrological, zodiacal language, it was a very Uranian moment. And the process that I went through over the next few years was a very Plutonian moment, like a long extended Pluto moment. But the moment that this conversation happened, Uranus was like, wake up. So for those of you who don't understand what I mean by that, if you've been in a situation where a lightning bolt hits and something rocks your world, you were going along, minding your own business, and everything was fine and comfortable, and then something showed up in your life that just completely changed everything. Very disruptive. Divorce is one of these experiences, like when someone comes home and says, I can't do this relationship anymore, or when someone gets relocated across the country, or when someone loses a job, or it's when someone discovers that they're pregnant. Like, it's a very surprising, like, what WTF just happened, like, okay, one of those moments. And I'm just in this conversation, riding home from school, and one of the girls in the group, and it's been a long time, this happened a long time ago, so I'm just paraphrasing, I'm just offering you what I continue to remember. She shared with us that in her family, she was taught that it came down in two ways. And yes, so this is where time, removes some of the details. Okay, so she was taught in her family that, biblically speaking, when people of different races come together, and specifically, her language was specifically white and black skinned people come together, and make a child, that child is an abomination of God. And I can still feel, how that feels to me, because I am a hybrid human. I am blended. And that part of my story has been a big part of my story in my interactions with other people. In myself, it makes perfect sense. Like, I'm like, I don't know why all people aren't. And all of the words are wrong. So I'm not going to say any of the words because they're all like wrong words. But inside myself, I'm like, it's the most natural thing in the world. But outside, when I was interacting with people, and I landed on this planet when it was still illegal in some states. And I think some states might still have it technically on the books that it's against the law for someone. And I don't like any of these words because they're ridiculous. I'll tell you my Crayola box story one day. But just so that you stay with me in the conversation, I landed on the planet at a time when it was still on the laws that Black skinned people and white skinned people cannot marry. And there's a very interesting history in that doesn't necessarily come from where we were taught to think it comes from, but another day. So but it was shocking to me that this person, because I considered this person a friend. And so this is where a couple of things happened to me that I am seeing happen in the world, that have been happening in our society since that fateful election. Was it 2016? I don't remember dates so well sometimes, depending upon the topic. So anyway, okay, so what happened? No. I'm going to tell you how I see it reflected in you, how I'm seeing it out there in the world right now. I am seeing people who thought that they were surrounded by friends discover that the people around them have beliefs that feel like such threats to the very existence of the person that people have been going into fight, flight, freeze for a number of years now. And depending upon the topic that we're talking about, it doesn't matter what political social identity you claim for yourself. I've seen it happen in all the groups. So as I'm sitting on this bus riding home with this group of people that I think are my friends, I learn that one of these people is being taught to believe that I don't belong here on the planet, that I am the word abomination still gives me chills. That is a big word for a teenager to be using. And it is meant to cancel out individuals and whole groups of people. It is not a word I rock with, but it is a word I'm fascinated by. So the lightning bolt wasn't that people thought this, because I knew I knew at this point that the people thought this. And it wasn't just white folks, Black folks also. I had the experience of Black folks telling me this nonsense as well, that because of the fact that my parents' skin doesn't match colors, that I'm not supposed to be here. So I knew that the world functioned in that way. I didn't know that the person I considered a friend, a person that I confided in the way it landed in me at the time felt that way. So what I'm saying is, now, all these years later, I can look back on that conversation and understand that this person was being groomed to think that way, but she didn't necessarily believe it herself. She was in a place of teenage exploration of ideas. That's what we do as teenagers. We should continue doing that as adults on some level. in some ways it is necessary to solidify in these values. And all of that just landed in my head is for another video. But I couldn't see that as a teenager talking to my peer. As a teenager talking to my peer, I was shocked and stunned and fascinated, because one of my natural tendencies is curiosity and fascination. So I didn't know what to do with that information, and it didn't feel safe. This is what I want to say. I thought I was in a friend peer group with someone who thought like me, and I didn't think I was an abomination. I knew other people thought it, but that was not my relationship. I had other conflicts around being a blended hybrid human, but that was not one of them. I knew I wasn't a mistake, and this is how I know other people who fall into these abomination categories are not a mistake. I was made by my creator. My creator does not make mistakes, does not misdesign human beings. And I want you all to hear that. Those of you who are out there making judgments on people because they don't show up in ways that are comfortable for you. And I'm not talking about people who are doing harm, and I should not have to qualify it in this way. I'm talking about people who are born into a body with a set of brain synapses that don't see the world and experience the world the way that you do, making people wrong. Went home and told my mother. And I don't remember the conversation. I had a lot of questions about the Bible. And this is one of those things that added to the conflicts I was already having, had been having conflicts for years about biblical teachings. And this definitely added to it. But I also knew that, again, this is not the first time I heard it. It's just the first time I heard it coming out of a peer's mouth, out of my community and my neighbor's mouth, someone I directly felt I was next to. And there are a lot of people feeling fear because they are feeling like their neighbors, the people around them, are enemies, are unsafe. So my mother has always been a fierce protector. So she went and addressed the situation in the way a fierce protector mother would. And I will not get into her story. That's her story to handle, and I wasn't there. But I love my mother, and I want to acknowledge. And I think a lot of the non-God-given ways that my brain works comes from watching my parents in action in their lives. What I decided to do, and I don't remember the details of how everything felt and how long this shock lasted, but what I do remember, and what I have been wanting to talk with people about for years, is I decided to go into it. What happened for me is some part of my brain woke up and realized, oh, we're not actually safe in the world. We think we're talking to someone who thinks like this, but that's not actually what's happening. So I want to understand how people who think I shouldn't be alive, I want to know why they think that. And that's what I did. I started going towards these people that were known to say things like this. So Focus on the Family was one of the first things that I went to, because I grew up in church, and I happened to live in a place where very conservative Christian and just very conservative thought was like super active. I couldn't hang with Focus on the Family, you guys. I don't remember how long, but I could not hang with like the talk shows and all. I just couldn't do it. And what it looked like is I would turn it on, and then I would dip out. I just couldn't stay in my body long enough to like hear what they were saying. But the person that I could do this with and understand, this happened over years, you know, I don't know how many years, but this happened over years. This didn't happen in a weekend or a few months or whatever. This skill that I'm about to describe to you happened over the course of years. So I found Rush Limbaugh, conservative talk radio. I don't know what it was, but radio station, and I would turn it on. And at the time, I was listening to public radio. Now, I lived in a state that, like in my teenage mind, was like I was learning about, I actually don't want to put my views out like that, but not in this video. But I lived in a conservative Western state, if that helps any of you guys locate, like just ideologically. Libertarianism was a thing, and Republicans were a thing, and Democrats and liberalism were a thing, but I wouldn't say it was a liberal state. Pockets of liberalism, but like conservative, Christian, leave me alone and let me do my thing, you know. Which I think I don't think I'm super grateful for. I was going to say, I think what was really helpful to the development of the way that my brain works. But I know that it was like, I'm very grateful for having had all of the experiences that I've had, because my brain can reach out in several different directions. I started listening to Rush Limbaugh, and in the beginning, I couldn't stand his voice. And I want you to hear me say that, because there are those of you out there who you say the very same thing. I've heard it. I have heard it. I can't stand their voice. I can't stand their face. And then we go into this like elementary school, you know, you remember when we used to like hurl insults at one another. We go into that place in ourselves, because that's how we keep something away from us. Now, I've said this before, but I want to help you set it up as a foundation for yourself if you're going to experiment with this tool set. We don't have to agree with everything that we're hearing in the world, and we're not meant to. There's a reason why we have individual value systems based on what we were taught in our families of origin and the experiences that we've had from the beginning and then through our lives. Our values, some of those values are going to shift, because who and how we were as the very influential, malleable child, that informs the decisions. But at some point, we have to start questioning, refining our decisions. And that at some point is going to require reconsideration of our values. Some of our values will continue to come with us, but you know, if we're being honest about who we have been and who we are and where we want to go going forward in the future, unless we're going to stay stuck in the same place geographically, emotionally, intellectually, with our friend groups, unless we're going to stay absolutely stuck in place, stuck in time, like amber, like a mosquito in amber, we're going to have to be willing to grow and let some things go and bring some new things in. That is part of a life cycle. So, an example that a lot of people might be able to relate to is over the past few years, we have had this shift from being hyper career focused to how can I spend more time with my family and make that a priority? That's a value system that was operating. Money and paycheck, and we may have been supporting our families, but the priority was, I have to go to work, I can't spend time with my kids. Whereas a lot of people have seen this shift of, I need to make my work life serve my family life. Family comes first. I need to work because that's the system that we're living in, but that has to serve what I'm doing over here. That's a shift in values. I wanted to keep it real simple so you'd stay with me. Okay, so Rush Limbaugh. So his voice just like, it made me ill. I remember, so I started these things listening to a radio, like in my bedroom. But when I got a car, I would drive around, to work, to whatever, kids do when they have cars. And I remember, this is actually where I remember my Rush Limbaugh lessons. It's in this car. When I would start feeling really agitated, and hopefully you're taking some notes on this, because these are the signals that you can start working with that will help you transform this into a superpower for yourself. I would get sick to my stomach. I would get really agitated, like my body would get really hot, and I would have these flashes of heat, and I'd get really angry, and I'd start arguing back with him. I was in that like habitual response mode, and I would turn the radio off, or I'd turn it to something I wanted to listen to. Like there used to be a time when there was, fun things on the radio. And I did that for a while. And then I'd go back in and I'd turn it back on again and see how long I could listen to him before I had such strong reactions that I had to exit, get out of the room. Somewhere along the way, and this was my yoga practice. So yoga in the sense of bringing us into contact with something. It was also my muscle building practice. And I didn't know this at the time. I didn't understand that that's what I was doing. I just came back because the thing that was driving me was, I want to feel safe in the world. What's the signal of danger? What are the words? What are the expressions? Who are the people who are dangerous to me? I want to understand how they think and what they're talking about so that I know where I'm safe and where I'm not safe. That impulse evolved later into, I want to understand why they believe what they believe. That becomes useful down the road when we're trying to have a conversation and trying to make changes. But eventually that pure reactivity, what I remember is in one of those moments, I said, wait a minute, why am I so angry about this? And then asking that question, I can feel the chills in my body right now. Getting curious about my reactions and my reactivity opened up a new door for me to start going down or walking through in this practice of learning how to listen to someone that I knew I disagreed with. Now, when I say knew I disagreed with, I thought I disagreed with. So what started happening from there, and it's all a blur, I started learning how to monitor my physical responses. So I couldn't do anything about the nausea, like the way my stomach would flip, but I could do something about like whatever was happening in my heart space. And I didn't have any of this language as a teenager. And this went into my early 20s, this practice. It was in my early 20s that I started getting a language, because that's when I got into the world of body work as a professional. Anyway, another video, but an entire skill set learned from that discipline, massage therapy, and all of the things that come with hands-on healing work. But I started getting curious about the reactivity, and I started breathing with it. Like, I taught myself my first breath work. And I would take a breath. When I wanted to turn him off, I would take a breath, pause on the mute button or the cancel button of my radio, and listen to a few more things that he had to say. And that became my practice for however long I did that, so that I could stay in my body instead of checking out. What started happening, and again, this was not a quick process. This took years, all of this. What took years was for me to be able to sit and listen to someone that I felt was so opposed to my way of being in the world, and to the relationships, the quality of relationships I wanted to have with other human beings, feeling so opposite and so in conflict and unreconcilable with another person. The thing that I learned was how to be in that experience and find points of connection. When we find points of connection with another person, we are able to create spaces of safety, which then allow us to actually start having a dialogue, which will allow us to begin to understand, or at least see, one another. When we understand someone, again, it doesn't mean we agree with them. It doesn't mean that we're giving up what we believe in. It means that we are willing to start working with that person as a human being, instead of throwing them away like trash. Instead of saying they're this and that. I like that saying, this, that, and the third, which means we have no ability to progress culturally, socially, or otherwise if we're constantly throwing people away as trash. And then we'll each stay in our little sides. I believe there's more than two sides. Like, it's not just the red and the blue. There's like a lot of other sides that people take. You know, there's the side of, I'm not getting involved in anything. Lots of people picking sides and like hanging out in their dugout with their team members. This practice with Rush Limbaugh became a meditation practice for me over the years. I started teaching myself how to stay in my body and how to focus, how to recognize when I was being activated and reactive, and how to transform that into something that could be receptive. There was a lot that I disagreed with him on and continued to disagree with him on. And to my surprise, there were things that he would say that I would be like, yep, I totally get that. I understand. And that, when that started happening, was an eye-opening experience for me. And from the Rush Limbaugh experience, I was able to go into and listen to other conservative minds, like very, very conservative. My parents were conservative. Like, we clashed on beliefs. which is kind of what the next generation does. You know, like that's part of the story of generations and cycles of decline, going back to my previous video. So it, like, here's the thing. This is why I say that. People look at me and assume that they know where I'm coming from. And sometimes people are right. And I've experienced in my life enough times people are wrong. They're incorrect because people just refuse to talk to one another and ask questions. We just make assumptions. Oh, you know, they're in this kind of body, so they must feel this kind of way. And they said this kind of thing, so they must believe this about all the things that we think are related to that thing. The more that we are able to stay present with complexity and nuance, life is way more interesting when there's complexity and nuance. It can be frustrating, and I am learning to appreciate simplicity more and more. But if we're honest with ourselves, we don't exist on a flat line. We have curves, and you know, if we identify as being conservative in our thinking, there's going to be somewhere in our thinking where we're not. And if we identify with being liberal in our thinking, there's going to be somewhere in our thinking that we're not. And that's variation and variety. And I think it's necessary to our survival. You know, if we look at farming and monocropping, just having one thing makes the thing or group of things or things in that group very vulnerable to disease and infestation and et cetera, et cetera. Our resilience comes from our ability to handle multiple ideas in the same space. Yeah. Our resiliency comes from our ability to handle multiple ideas in the same space. Like, that is what I'm wanting to see for humanity, our ability to handle multiple ideas in the same space. Otherwise it's not going to work going forward into this new era of humanity that we're moving into. We have got to learn how to hold a multiplicity of experience, and we have the capacity. These younger generations that are coming in have the capacity to do that. Does not mean that older generations do not have the capacity. Human brains, human beings, human spirits can learn to adjust, adapt, initiate new things, grow, learn. A lot of emphasis gets put on the newer generations as though they're supposed to fix things. They can't fix things by themselves. We can learn from them, but we are also, there are elders beyond me, and there are those of us who are like coming into those decades of elderhood, and we are not to lose the elderhood, the crone years, because there's wisdom in that. We have lived experience. There's a lot of wisdom coming in innately in these 20-year-olds and these younger kids. Part of that, I believe, is the work that the generations before them have done. That's kind of how that works. You know, we build things, and that even means like our internal philosophies, the way that our energetic systems function. The generations ahead do the work. It hasn't required a lot of people to be doing the work. And I know for some of you, like, I've lost you at this point. Some of you understand what I'm talking about. I'm just going to keep running with this. I can come back in another video and break it down. Small groups of people who have been willing to do transpersonal work and inner work and therapy, like learning how to recognize ourselves in the interaction with another human being. Very important skill to have, because otherwise, one of the things that we're doing is just projecting all of our stuff, all of our internal stuff out onto the world, which doesn't allow us to deal with it, bring ourselves into wholeness, and then come into a conversation and be able to contribute to some sort of new thing, third thing coming to life. Okay, let me just go back to the superpower in Rush Limbaugh. I am able to sit and listen to a lot of different viewpoints at this point in my life. And when I become reactive, I'm able to witness that and get curious about it. That's one thing I'm able to do, which then can shift me enough so that I can maybe sit and listen to the rest of the conversation so that I'm getting my information firsthand, rather than reading news clips or memes or little synapses is what's coming to mind, like but like tweet, like I like to listen to people directly rather than getting the bulk of my information from social media threads. Now, I might see something in social media that piques my interest, and then I'll go investigate on my own and get as much of a fuller picture as I want or need. What I'm saying is I'm able to listen to a lot of diverse voices and opinions and maintain my curiosity about them so that I can gather enough information so that I can start asking intelligent questions and forming intelligent rebuttals, responses, counter arguments, suggestions for the negotiation room or table. That is one of the reasons why we learn to do this, so that rather than just staying stuck in the fight, flight, freeze, we can gather information, gather our resources, and then present something to keep the conversation going. A conversation is a back and forth. It's not necessarily going to be resolved in one or two tries. It's an ongoing tennis match. And we need to learn how to stay with it and stay with ourselves and not get deactivated by our reactions, like becoming intelligent about, oh, wow, that really sets me off. And then starting to get curious about why, like what's happening for me when I can't stand someone's face or can't stand the sound of someone's voice. What is happening for me? Why? It's time for me to wrap this up. These are skills that we need to learn. We need to learn how to stay in the presence of someone that we feel we are a polarity opposite of, diabolically opposed to, is coming to mind with like one of those old school cartoons with the dog, like the evil dog. I can't remember. Somebody's going to remember. Old cartoon, diabolical. It's a good word. Some people, some of you out there are having this experience, like diabolical. I'll have to look that word up and then maybe share the meaning of it in the show notes. But some of us have intensified our disagreements with other people so much that the other person or the disagreement or whatever has become diabolical, like devilish. You know, they're the devil. And I think in some cases that is probably true, but I don't think in conversation and in ideological exchange, I don't think in conversation that that's true. I don't think in ideological exchange that's actually often true. There are some things that are just plain wicked. I said that in my last video, but a lot of it, when we want to fall into that verbiage, what I've seen so far is a lot of it is our inability to get past the surface level of the arguments with another person, whether it's our partner, our children, our coworkers, or our larger communities. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. This is the first time I've shared that story like with a wider audience, and then that particular superpower. And I'm gonna speak about it more. I want to teach people how to do that, like as a practice. Like it's a body practice. It's a very physical practice. And if you're out there, if you're out there and you want to experiment with this, one of the things I want to say to you is it is okay to stop when you've had enough. I did that many, many times in the early years that I was developing it. I do that now. You know, in these recent years, I have been tuning into some voices that have, like, they've really shaken my sense of perception about how I see the world and what I think is true. And I've had to like tap out for a while. And if you've been doing it for long enough, that, well, I think at any point that tap out is an integration process. Like, we've been in our own energy field, we've been in our own thought field, which is an energy field, like really cool, can be documented in a lab. We've been in our own for a while. One of the things that happens when we come into contact with someone else who has a different energy field, a different set of beliefs, a different vibration and frequency, is like they're, you know, if we don't resonate with them and if they're not neutral, we're clashing with them. And the clash doesn't mean that we can't be in their space. If we want to get to know this person, if we want to work with this person, we're going to have to learn how to maintain our space, stay in our energy, and let their energy stay with them. And again, that word alchemy is really present, but also integration. Integration is a way of becoming whole. And so there are these individuals, we are individual humans. When we are working through conflict, one of the things that we are working towards is wholeness, integration. And on a larger scale, in a community, when we step away from something that is difficult for us to manage in our energy field, emotionally, intellectually, in our value system, like all the things that make us up as individuals, when we step away from something, we're like, okay, I've had enough. Like, I've taken in all I can take in. When we allow ourselves to step away and do that, the things that are meant for us, the things that are meant to unlock some new areas of our experience and expression in life, that will happen. And the things that are not meant for us to carry or engage with, they'll fall away permanently or fall away for a period of time, whatever it's going to be. And when that process has happened, we can go back to the conversation, back to the voice, and pick up a little bit more. So what I'm doing right now is I'm giving you permission to step away when you feel like you genuinely need to step away, because we do not want to further blow out our systems and be completely unable to engage with what's going on around us. You know, baby steps. Again, this took me years to learn how to do well enough so that now in this new cycle that we are all in, where all sorts of information is being revealed, and all sorts of opinions that have been around me for all of my life, but that I wasn't aware of, I now have a structure in place internally where I can stay in my curiosity most of the time, and recognize where my values are going to continue to be my values, where it's like, I'm like, no, that's not negotiable. I am not willing or able to negotiate on that. But being clear about it and recognizing that the other person feels as strongly about their position. Okay, I'm gonna sign off here, and I'll come back. I'll come back with more. I have a lot of conversations I want to share, hoping that they help people learn some new skills for this new world that is coming into form or will be coming into form. All right, have a good day, you guys.